If you're an online course creator, agency owner, or coach, and you're struggling with delegating tasks that feels too risky and with too high consequences if they screw up, then congratulations, you're in the perfect spot. Today, you're going to discover 6 ways you can reduce risk when you're outsourcing to a VA you don't really know or don't really trust that well. So you can focus on the 5% that will move the needle in your business. So I come from a place where everyone has really high trust. I come from a bomb disposal unit where it's like, we have to trust each other. But it doesn't come from nothing. We spent years, 4 years at least, training together to make sure that we can trust each other. There is a high level of trust, which means when I walk down towards a bomb, the team behind me, they got my back. And I know they have it because they've proven it over and over and over and over and over again. In the remote world, it's completely opposite. I realized when I started out. It's some random dude in a random country, with a random paycheck that you don't really understand. And you're supposed to give them like your credit card so they can pay for stuff. And you're supposed to like, I get it. And you're supposed to put your company brand on that person and hope they don't screw it up. I totally get it. We don't want to do that. We definitely don't want to do that. But we also don't want to get stuck doing everything ourselves because that's equally as bad, right? Because if we're doing everything ourselves, we're never going to be able to break through that financial plateau. We're never going to be able to utilize a team. And we're going to have to work until we're like 200 years old and die from stress. I like to see it in this way. There's a balance between the risks of the task and the trust they have in the person who needs to do it. You don't want to have everybody on your team be your family. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, you probably don't even have time to build family relationship status with your family. So expecting to have that type of trust with your remote VA is just doesn't make any sense. You're putting your energy in the wrong things. But there needs to be a balance. So you basically have two options. Either you can build really strong trust with your team, or you can make the tasks in a way where they don't require a lot of trust to be solved. We're going to talk about how to make tasks risk-free so that your team couldn't solve them. And if they screw it up, it doesn't really matter. And this works on really complex tasks, really simple tasks. It's a beautiful system. And I'm going to use the same principles I used in bomb disposal, which means risk mitigation, which means reducing the consequences of someone doing something wrong, which means you can be way more comfortable by handing tasks over to someone, knowing that even if they screw it up, the consequences will be small. And that's a big deal. So first off, I want to acknowledge that I have done personality tests a couple of times and I score incredibly low on neuroticism. Neuroticism is the tendency to feel negative emotions, anxiety, doubt, fear, stuff like that. So in a room of 100, I'll be the 99th less worried person in the room. So I get that. I come from a place where most things aren't, a big problem. I've done skydiving, I climbed high mountains, I've done bomb disposal, and I'm still alive. So everything in my life up to now has taught me that it's not that bad. A lot of you guys out there have a different experience of life, and I 100% respect that things are real, things are dangerous. But I want you to know that going into this discussion, I will come from a perspective of everything is going to work its way out. It's going to be fine. Whatever it is, we'll be able to tackle it and manage it. So don't think I'm complacent. I'm the absolute opposite. I'm the one who makes sure that I really mitigate the risks. And once I've mitigated, I go for it. Here's an example from my life. If you and I were to go climbing together, we're going to rappel off like a 50-foot cliff or whatever. You and I are going to stand with the same stuff. I'm going to look at my gear, nod, and we're going to go for it. And once we go for it, I'm going to be calm. I'm going to be relaxed. I'm going to enjoy the stuff. You, on the other hand, might be going over the cliff, super nervous, shaking, and wonder if you're going to die or not. That's the experience of a lot of people. And the reason why I'm able to be more relaxed in that situation is that I'm overly cautious. Because before you and I step over the ledge, I've already checked my gear. Even though I have a guide with me, I've checked the gear. And when I'm checking the gear, I have two ways to go. Either I'm comfortable with the gear, it looks okay, it looks safe, and I trust the gear. And if I trust the gear, I'm just going to trust the gear 100%, not 50%, not 75%. I'm just going to trust it. Or I'm not going to trust it, and I'm not going to do it. But for some of you guys, you're going to get on the ledge and you're going to be like, oh, I hope it works. I hope it works. Is this look okay? Is this safe? Is this not? And you're going to be worried all the way down while we're rappelling. So I want to get you to a point where you are looking at your tasks, looking at your equipment, saying, hey, this risk, I'm willing to tolerate. It all looks good. Nothing's going to happen, which means you could delegate or you could jump off the cliff or rappel down the cliff, feeling confident that it's going to work. So we want that decision in time for you to be either go or not go. Either you delegate or you don't. And if you delegate, you let them do their thing and you check in on them, but you don't micromanage, you don't take over, you don't regain control in some weird way. Once you go beyond the cliff, you zip line down and do whatever you're supposed to do, and you trust the system. Does that make sense? I hope so, because that's a big part of this. And if you can, I would really recommend you do a personality test. I would recommend the big 5. You can get one on understandmyself.com. I think it's one of the more legit ones. But what you really want to look for is something that puts you in a relationship to other people. So if it's just a test that gives you a score, it doesn't really matter. But you want to know how high in neuroticism you are compared to other people, how agreeable you are compared to other people, because that will allow you to communicate with others much better. So that's a little side note, but it's really important, especially as a leader, but even for anyone who's just, a parent or a friend. So going back to the delegating a risky task is that the most common thing that I see is that you think you have to build trust to delegate a task, that you really have to trust your people. Like if I give you my credit card and I'm just like, oh, hey, here, go for it. I'm like, oh, I kind of have to trust you because what if you empty my bank account? Like, yeah, but how else are you going to pay my bills if you don't have my credit card, right? I get it. But this way of thinking keeps you doing everything yourself, because if everything is too risky, you're like, oh, I got to do this because otherwise it's not up to standard, or you do this because if they screw it up, it's going to cost too much money. And it keeps you in this endless loop of doing everything yourself. And you're going to miss out on the beautiful opportunities, which otherwise would have arisen from the space in your calendar when you're delegating as much as you can. Another part of this is not having any type of risk tolerance. Like we got to take some risks. People are going to screw it up and they're going to make us look bad. And we're going to have to be like, oops, I'll make it up to you. And then we make it up to you. I had a situation with American Airlines a few weeks ago. It's like they screwed up. They diverted my flight to New York and it was just a shit show. But I still like them because you know why? They covered their butts. Because they said, okay, so we're sorry we screwed it up. We'll repay you for all the stuff. We'll give you some money for food, or blah, 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 and they treat me really well, which means I'm okay with that. I'm going to fly with them again. So it's not that we're making a mistake that's the problem. It's if we don't fix the mistake, that's the problem. So as long as you're willing to fix the mistakes that your team incurs, then you won't have any problems. So let's look a little bit at what I think you should do instead. Instead of building trust with your team to like a ridiculous point of time where they can, take your entire credit card and just run with it, and some random person in the Philippines is like, yeah, I totally trust them with my credit card. Instead of doing that, we risk mitigate or risk minimize your task. So instead of giving them unlimited access to your credit card, let's just say we give them a team card and we say that their weekly amount that they can spend is $200. Would that make you feel more comfortable delegating payment tasks to them? Yes or no? I think most of you would say yes. Like, oh, that's a risk I'm willing to take. And maybe you say like, no, you know what? My risk, I wouldn't be able to do that. Well, maybe the limit is 20. But I think you get the point here. The idea is to not give them unlimited access, unlimited funds, unlimited time, but giving them enough that we feel comfortable to delegate. The benefits of doing it this way are many, and it's pretty clear. One is just the relaxation for you mentally, knowing that if they were to go loco bananas with your credit card, they could only spend $200. So if they are like the criminals of the world, they can't really steal a lot from you anyways. And instead, you'll be able to delegate more freely. You'll be able to give them the mandate to figure things out. You could even do a thing like this, which is one of my favorites. You could say, hey, as long as the problem doesn't cost more than $200, it's on you, fix it. Whatever you do with those 200, I don't really care as long as you solve the problems. This will give them the freedom to operate within this rule set you have just set up, and they will come with less questions, less need for your help, and more autonomy on their part, which is great because that creates, on your end, time and energy to do the things that are important to you. The strategic decisions, the things that you're looking forward to do that they never have time to do. I mean, with a system like this, you can even have them pay themselves because they have access to the company credit card and they can pay themselves €200 per month or whatever. It's just great. Like, that's what I want you to think about all your tasks. Like, how can I make the consequences small in case something goes wrong. Now I think you've understood the idea of risk minimizing. Let's go through a few ways of doing this. First off, let's talk about how to limit access. So in the example of a web development working on your web pages, what I like to do is to give them limited access. Like you would give them roles. Let's say you work inside WordPress. Well, you just give them a viewer or a publisher role. So once they get into the system, there are only a few things they can do. So even if they were malicious, the worst thing they could do is just write a nasty blog post and post it. They can't like erase anything or they can't do that. So the first principle I want you to have in mind is to limit access. This means you could give people access, but it's only limited to the things that you're okay with if they screw it up. The second principle I want you to use, I call triggers. Triggers are a point in the process where they need to stop and ask for your permission to move on. An example of this would be just before publishing something. So I have a few triggers in my content productions, and one of them is just before pressing publish. That's when a trigger goes out to me saying, hey, you need to review this. And then I'm the person who presses the publish button. This is how I usually do with maybe new VAs or people I haven't really gotten to know yet, to make sure that whatever comes out into the real world is approved by me and makes a lot of sense. And once I've done it a few times, I hand over the publish button to them. So principle number 2 is to have a trigger. The third principle is to start small and build complexity. So if you have a complete process from ideation to content publishing, then maybe there's only a small fraction of that you start out by delegating. Maybe you want to start out with the ideation if you're comfortable with that, because that means they could just create all the ideas and then you could kind of give them feedback on how that process works. And once they're like, oh, you're good with the work they're doing, you can add on to the next level. Okay, now it's time to create. They figured out the ideation, you know, they could do that. Now you add on the creation and then you focus on the creation and you work with them until they figure that out. And then once they figure out the creation part, you let them run autonomously with the ideation, then the creation. And then at the end, you will have them do the entire process: ideation, creation, and publishing. So let's get to the main part, probably the most important one, and that is to create SOPs and workflow that are legit. What I mean by that is that the best way to risk mitigate is making sure that people can do the task correctly. This is where SOPs and workflows come in. You got to define like a start point, an end point, and then, track out how that should be done. You got to have some freaking workflow. You got to train your people on how to do this. This is the meat, but this is actually what your job is. If there's anything you should be good at, it's creating workflows and procedures. There are 3 things that make you successful as a leader. It is you as the leader, it is your team, and it's the structures surrounding your teams. And workflows are the structures around that you really need to make work. You can go to our community. It's for free. You find all the ways how to build workflows and do stuff like that. Or you could reach out to me and we build the workflows for you. But at the minimum, I want to make sure that you at least have a visual flow chart so people can clearly see what this process looks like and when they need to contact you, when these triggers are, Do they need to contact you before they publish? Do they need to do after the ideation? Whatever it is, it needs to be super clear so that they know that now it's time to contact my guy, my boss, or whatever. And this is also kind of like your contract with your team. So if something goes wrong, you could go back and say, hey, what happened? Like, didn't you understand this? Or this is what we agreed upon. Why didn't you do this? So this gives you a good leverage if there's if there's a need to fire someone in the future or something like that. By the way, all of this is still inside the crystal clear delegation toolkit, which you can find on the website, sankusleadership.com/podcast. So you don't really have to think that much. You go in there, you use that, you fill it out, you send it to your VA. They're going to give you amazing results back. And if there's still any issues on how to do it, reach out to me on LinkedIn or email. So that is it for today, guys. We have just gone through how to make tasks risk-free, or at least low risk, so that you'll be more comfortable delegating the complex things to your team. Stop building a bunch of trust. It takes years and it's very complicated. Instead, make your tasks risk-free. If you're wondering like, what task should I start with and stuff like that, in sankusleadership.com/podcast, you will also find something that I call 151 risk-free tasks every online entrepreneur should delegate. You could download that one and get a bunch of ideas of things to start delegating if you're stuck. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. And as always, it's so much fun to do this, and especially being outside right now. I'm in Vancouver, Canada, and it's just lovely weather. I even got ducks everywhere. Take care and stay well.